you. Okay, everybody, we got over the hump. So, a little natural history about ospreys. They have a very broad habitat use. Here in Rhode Island, you often see them by the coastline, but in a lot of places, you can also see them by freshwater. And broad habitat use, you see them in urban areas. I've seen them in Central Falls, Lincoln, Rhode Island, coincidentally where I'm from. In Providence, there are osprey, but also in more rural areas as well. And they live from 15 to 20 years, and they migrate. The ones that live in the northern hemisphere and then migrate down to the southern hemisphere where they spend their winters. They can fly 125,000 miles over the course of their entire life. So they fly a lot. And they can be found on 6 continents, that's not Antarctica, and which is really impressive because there's only one species in the osprey family as well, and they're universal. I went to URI as well as our 2 previous presenters, and I did a study abroad in Indonesia, and when I was there, I saw an osprey. I asked our guide, "Well, what is that? It looks just like an osprey." He said, "It's an osprey." So, if it broke, don't fix it. And the females are a bit larger than males as well. And they build nests atop tall trees, cliffs, man-made structures, and that's to prevent predation. They like to have lookouts to be able to look for predators. The most common predators are bald eagles are one of them. They will eat young osprey. Great horned owls will eat young osprey, and they'll also take adults as well. And also raccoons. Raccoons can crawl up into the nest and grab eggs. And they do have high nest site fidelity, meaning they'll come back to the same spot year to year. So if you're a local, you may have heard about this. Rhode Island Energy, this was on the news. This was last April. Because osprey nests causing outages in I think Warren or Bristol area. Yeah. And that's because oftentimes you'll see these nests on high power lines, on utility poles, and sometimes on transformers, which then when you have high voltage and a lot of flammable nest material, they explode, you catch on fire. So that results in power outages. So a little more about the past specific to New England and Rhode Island. So prior to the 1940s, there were 1,000 nesting pairs in southern New England, and that's defined by between New York City and Boston, Mass. And then between 1940 and 1970, the population declined in the same area to only 109 pairs. And in Rhode Island, in the early 70s, there were only 13 pairs of osprey left. Well, why did this happen? It's because of exposure to DDT. For those of you familiar with, especially Rachel Carson's silent spray, DDT is a common pesticide used from the 40s to the 70s. So here's some photos. This is city of Waco, Texas. Destructive spraying out gas, DDT, and you see these fellas, they aren't wearing gloves, masks, anything. Or we have it being distributed by planes. And DDT is used in urban areas, suburban areas, agricultural settings. It's really a catch-all. And then my favorite, these kids playing DDT out on the beach. Nobody knew how dangerous it really was. And last one's an advertisement. DDT is good for me. Oh gosh. So why this happened is caused by exposure to DDT. And DDT affected osprey, especially because when DDT would be sprayed and then there'd be a rain event, the excess DDT and those residues would wash off of whatever surface it was on and get into our waterways. And then fish are really the primary source of food for osprey. It's like 99.5% of an osprey's diet is fish. And what happens is when that DDT is in the water, those fish taken in just by respiration through their gills, which then, as the osprey eat these contaminated fish, they are getting DDT in them. It causes eggshell thinning in birds. So these eggshells are too thin to be viable or survive, or sometimes these birds will sit on them and even crush their own eggs, and they can also just die by poisoning. But all of that nice stuff said, we do have good news, which are the osprey population is growing across the country. There are a lot of ospreys. And so 2014, which I guess now is a little bit of an antiquated data point, there are over 1,200 nesting pairs in southern New England. And in Rhode Island, as of 2023, there are over 350 osprey nests. Not all of those are active nests, or were active in 2023, which we'll get into a little more, but we do have a load of nests now. So, well, how do we know this? Well, I'm glad you're here. So we've been observing a growing population. In 1978, the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management, or RIDEM, began a nest monitoring program. And this was really just by staff and by a couple of volunteers because we only had a handful of nests. And in 2010, the Audubon Society of Rhode Island assumed management of this program because of our very great base of volunteers. And volunteers collect data on nest activity and productivity. So we're looking at which nests have active offspring in them, where are these nests, and how many fledglings are being produced by each nest each year. So, and volunteers, they also submit locations of new nests. We don't currently actively search out these nests. These are all incidental observations of new nests. But this year, we're going to hope to have some more programs to actively search for nests. So, what you all came here for, the trends. So first, the number of active or successful nests in Rhode Island from 2010 to 2023. So an active nest is defined by an osprey nest that has any amount of activity. If there's birds in that nest, whether or not they're observed breeding, that's considered active. A successful nest is a nest where there were fledglings that survived the season and flew the coop at the end of the season. So successful nests are a subset of the active nests. So you can see in general, we're going up. There was a dip in 2019. You can see in 2023, we had our highest number recorded of 251. And overlaying that, we also have the number of fledglings observed in total. And that's higher just because typically ospreys will have 2, sometimes 3 fledglings per nest, so it's a little higher. You can see it really went up and down kind of here in the mid-2010s. And what's interesting, though, is when an osprey fledges, it will not come back to the nest for 2 years. They'll spend a whole season on their wintering grounds down in South America. So this increase from 2016 really relates to here, because this is when these birds would be coming back to Rhode Island. So there's kind of a lag there. So also the number of volunteers that we've had over time has changed. So we started about 60 in 2010. You see here 2016, 2017, we had a great number, but we've been steadily decreasing. 2023 being our lowest recently. That said, we've been doing a big push to recruit more volunteers, especially because we have more nests than ever. So please, if you're interested in volunteering, please find me afterwards. But already for 2024, we have our 60 from last year, and we're also at 50 new signups. So we're on a pace to double our volunteer base for 2024. But we could always use more than that. So also, I wanted to show the number of nests we actually visited, because not every year can we visit every single nest, especially with changes in our volunteer numbers. So you see in 2023, what's important to note is even though we had more active and successful nests in 2023, we also visited more nests than ever before in 2023. A lot of that is because we had what I call our osprey nest roundup. So what happened was at the beginning of the season, we had not very many nests were being observed each week. There were about 120 nests that had no volunteers signed up for them. And so what we did is at the end of July, we had 1 week where volunteers, not only monitors, but local birders and anyone who was interested could come and help us by visiting one of those nests for just that one time. So we had one data point on those nests. So we were able to really visit a bunch. The next thing I want to talk about are the trends in the number of nests in East Bay, Rhode Island versus West Bay, which I know we're not all local, so I didn't want to take a second just to talk about that. So East Bay is really the east side of the Narragansett Bay here. So Newport County, Bristol County, and East Providence is a town here, which I call East Bay. And West Bay, the west side of the Narragansett Bay, are everything else. So that would be the rest of Providence County, Kent County, and Washington County. So what we see here is the number of active nests in East Bay versus West Bay. East Bay is in red, West Bay is in green. You can see originally, West Bay had more. And a lot of this is concentrated down in South County area, and I'll show a video of that in a moment. But you can see here in the mid 2010s, it goes back and forth and back and forth. And then this year, most of our active and successful nests were in West Bay versus East Bay. So this is a GIF I made a while ago. I hope it plays. Oh, perfect. So this was from 2010 to 2020. This was the most recent data we had when I made this. It shows the relative density of active or successful osprey nests in Rhode Island over time. So you can see there's really two large hotspots of osprey. Down in South Kingstown, or Narragansett, Great Salt Pond is where one of the hotspots is. And then up in the northeastern part of the bay, that's the Bristol, Warren, Barrington area. But again, this is only up to 2020. So, and in that year, there were more nests in East Bay. So that's why when it ends, you see that big spot. Well, if we continue that out, 2023, we see more in West Bay. So I could use a little updating. So what factors affect osprey population growth in Rhode Island? Well, there's density-dependent factors and density-independent factors. So density-dependent factor is something that would influence population growth depending on how many osprey there are in a certain area. So osprey are quasi-colonial. They nest in aggregations, but that's not because they want to all nest together and they seek one another out, but it's really depending on habitat availability. So where there's more available habitat, you'll find more osprey. And also territoriality and competition. As there are more osprey in a certain area, that will lead to more competition. It'll lead to more harassment by conspecifics. Also, a lot of times when you have densities of osprey, males will be spending more time defending their nest from other birds rather than bringing in food for the young and the females. So that can lead to mortality in young birds. And density-independent factors would be prey availability. Prey availability changes independent of the number of osprey. So this could be the number of fish that happen to be in the Narragansett Bay or around the coast in a given year, or sea level rise. Sea level rise can impact osprey nest monitoring or osprey nesting. And so that's one we haven't looked into very much, but it can impact them. Well, what comes next? So we're going to continue to monitor our local population. Like I said, this year, we're on track to double our volunteer base and really monitor as many nests as we can. And also in the future, we're looking to understand the relationship between nest density and artificial nesting structures. I'm sure many of you see the platforms, the posts, the discs on top of utility poles for osprey. So we're interested in understanding if there are more of these artificial nesting structures, are osprey more willing to nest in aggregations? Oops. And also forecasting how sea level rise may impact nesting. And we want to dive deeper into the changes in osprey hotspots in Rhode Island over time, looking at prey species abundance, the Rhode Island DEM, that's fish trawling each year in the Narragansett Bay to look at the species of fish that are available and how many there are. And also we'd be interested in looking into changes in bathymetry, so the actual depth of the bay, because osprey can only forage within, I think it's 6 inches, maybe 12 inches deep in the water column. They aren't diving very deep like outstards, like puffins, things like that go really deep. So as areas get deeper, that may impact where osprey can nest or where osprey can forage, because then their prey species will go lower in the water if those places get deeper. And we also are looking to collaborate with other local organizations studying osprey in New England. Like I talked about, that last data point we have about how many osprey nests were in southern New England was from 2014, which is 10 years ago. So we love to collaborate with Connecticut Audubon and Mass Audubon, which are places that I know have osprey nest monitoring programs that we haven't collaborated with in the past.